And I can start that now if you like.
Perfect. Thank you, Andy. Yeah, and so just so everybody knows, we do record these just to keep a record of the conversation. It just helps us if there's anybody who missed the meeting on the city side, they can come back and access it later. And then if people missed it, then we post it on the website and then folks can watch it. So just want to make everybody aware that we do record these. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and get started here. It's 6:04. Welcome, everybody. I'm excited to share a little bit about the Church Avenue Complete Street Project. This is a project that is led by the City of Tucson, funded by Proposition 101, which is our kind of repaving initiative. We also have supplemental funding from our friends at RTA. So happy to have that. This is a repaving project, and typically we just go and we take the asphalt away and we put it back and put the striping exactly the same way that we found it before the project. In this case, we have an opportunity to kind of look at the street in a different way, and RTA has kind of helped us take it to the next level, so we appreciate their support. If you haven't taken this demographic survey yet, and you have a smartphone, if you point your cameras or point your smartphone's camera, excuse me, at that QR code in the bottom right-hand corner, it'll take you to a quick survey, and we appreciate it if you can fill that out. All right. So we've got a couple of goals for the meeting tonight. It's pretty simple. We want to share information about the project, talk about what the improvements are and where. We want to talk about the timeline for construction as well as design. We want to give you some more information in terms of where you can learn more about the project after the meeting and give you some opportunities to provide feedback. At the end of the presentation, which we'll try to make short, we want to answer your questions and get your feedback, and we'll try to make this as interactive as we can. My name is Colin Cheston, by the way. I'm a project manager here with the City of Tucson, Department of Transportation and Mobility, and I'm joined by Andy Bemis. So we're both co-project managers of this at the moment. Hi, Andy. Thanks for turning your camera on. And we'll be walking you through this project. You might be wondering how to ask a question. Some folks may use Teams all the time. Others, this may be new to them. So just want to make sure that you know how to ask a question. The first thing that you could do is you can raise your virtual hand. Depending on if you're on a PC or if you're on a Mac, your toolbar may look a little bit different. It may be in a different place. Mine's up at the top, but some people's is down at the bottom. But either way, the little icon is a hand, and it just looks like a hand being raised. So if you click on that, we'll try to monitor that, and we'll try to stop the presentation, and maybe Andy can let me know too if folks have their hand up. The second way to ask a question is just to simply type your question in the meeting chat. That works really well for us because we'll pay attention to that, and if we don't get to it during the presentation, we'll get to it at the end. The little icon looks like a little speech bubble. So you can click that and it'll open up a panel where you can type in your question. And then the third way is to just start talking. I'm looking at how many folks we have in the meeting. It looks like we've got about 15 people. So it may be a small enough group where you can do that. If you have something urgent and you want to interject, you can do that. But in general, it's probably best to wait till the Q&A if you can. All right, so the project location. The project is on Church Avenue, and it's between Franklin and Cushing. If you have been around in Tucson and have been either living downtown or you work downtown, and you've been around for at least a few years, you may this project may be familiar to you, and you may wonder, didn't I hear about this project a few years ago? And the answer is yes. So way back in 2014, we kicked off the original design phase of the project. And we started looking at how we could make this a more complete street, what we could do to make it safer for everybody and work better for all the users of the streets, not just people who drive. So we got a little bit down the road on that process, and what we realized is there was a lot of private development along this corridor. So the last thing we wanted to do was put down fresh asphalt and then have major construction equipment come through and mess it all up. So we put the project on pause intentionally, and we are now at the point where we're ready to pick it back up and finish the final design. These are the project goals. So we want to improve safety for everybody who uses the street, including people walking, biking, and driving. We definitely want to make it more comfortable and convenient to access downtown destinations by bike. We want to make it easier for the bus operators to navigate the streets, provide some areas for them to wait and queue. We don't want to make it extremely difficult for anybody to drive downtown. We know accessing downtown by car is currently the way most people get there. So, we are taking a close look at opportunities to make sure that we're taking those needs into account, while also making it a better place for people to walk and bike and take transit. We of course are going to improve the pavement condition. The entire street will be repaved all the way from Franklin to Cushing, and that matters to people who drive in, people who bike, of course, and people who are crossing the street in a wheelchair or have a mobility device that they're using. And finally, we want to address ADA deficiencies, which means improving the pedestrian experience, new crossing opportunities, and that also means rebuilding all of the curb ramps that are not currently ADA compliant. These are some of the project elements. We've got just an example image showing what those elements look like. So the goal and the intent is, right now there's one lane of traffic in each direction, and center turn lanes. I'd say that's the typical cross section, although it does vary a lot along the corridor. In some cases, there's 2 lanes in each direction with no left turn lane. In some cases, there's some right turn lanes or double left turn lanes. But the typical is 2 lanes in each direction and a left turn lane. In the areas where there isn't currently a left turn lane, we're going to try to add one. We know there's a big safety benefit to having an exclusive left turn lane, especially in a configuration where you have opposing lanes and no center median. And we've got a couple of segments along the corridor that look like that today. So we'd like to update the design for a better safety outcome. We do want to maintain on-street parking and loading. And this is a shot showing some current on-street parking. We're trying our best to maintain the on-street parking that's there today. There's a mix of parallel parking and angle parking. And if you check out the website, which I'll show you in a second, and look at the draft design, you'll see that we've maintained some of both. We do have some improved pedestrian crossings. And there's one here shown in front of the Pima County Courthouse, which is a very nice one with a landscape median. We're hoping to find some opportunities to add new pedestrian crossings or potentially relocate crossings to a place where it better lines up with pedestrian demand and or for safety reasons. We're going to be replacing all the curb ramps that are not ADA compliant. So we're going to get all of those up to standard so that folks that are in a wheelchair or using another mobility device can easily navigate the street. But we do have some bus-only waiting areas that we're integrating. Those are designed to improve bus operations and also alleviate concerns about cars getting stuck behind buses. And I didn't start with this, but bike lanes is one of the key elements. And the thinking is that right now we have only about 4,000 cars a day on the street, and so the roadway really has more lanes than it needs to accommodate the traffic that's there today. And so the plan is to repurpose one of the travel lanes in each direction, and that gives us room for bike lanes. And the bike lanes are likely to be buffered, and we are exploring having them be protected, which means adding a vertical element in that buffer space that you see striped in white. We think we may be able to do that north of Broadway, although cost is a potential limiting factor. So we're currently exploring what we can afford to do. Zooming out a little bit, I wanted just to talk about the importance of this project in terms of the connectivity of the network that we're building out for bikes, people who ride bikes. We've got 2 projects. One of them is the 9th Avenue Castro Bike Boulevard, and that's at the northern end of the project. That'll go from the end of the Church Avenue Complete Street project at Franklin all the way to Fort Lowell. And then we have another Bike Boulevard project to the south, so at Cushing Street, starting at Convent Avenue. That'll go through South Tucson and then down to the loop at the Julian Wash Greenway. So this is about 5.5 miles of low stress bikeway, and church is kind of smack dab in the middle of all of that. And then just thinking about the context of riding your bike downtown and trying to get to and through, it can be challenging because we do have some major barriers. And I just wanted to give a little bit of context for that. So the Santa Cruz River, Interstate 10, and the railroad tracks are all challenging because there's limited places to cross each of those. If you're coming from the side, Cushing Street is your easiest crossing. Congress and St. Mary's are both doable, but they're higher traffic, and it's a lot to navigate at those two locations on a bike. So Cushing Street is the way that a lot of people choose to ride their bikes to downtown from the west side. And the intent here is to, of course, connect to Cushing, and then folks that want to go north can turn left on Church Avenue and access not just destinations on Church, but throughout downtown. And then if you're coming from the east or the north side of downtown, your options are also a little bit limited. But the good news is that the 9th Avenue Bike Boulevard will connect via the Downtown Links project, which is another project that we don't really have time to get into too much tonight. But that will provide a crossing under the railroad tracks, or excuse me, over the railroad tracks via a new deck plaza that's part of the Downtown Links project. So people will be able to access that way. And then finally, from the east, we're working on a 9th Street Bike Boulevard project, and folks can then use the 4th Avenue undercrossing to get to Congress, although Congress is not that pleasant. So a lot of people end up using Tool, which is a little bit lower traffic and has some bike facilities, at least on part of it. And so that provides another way to get to Church Avenue. But the big picture is this is a much needed north-south connection that's gonna, we think, really help with people who ride their bikes downtown. Okay, so if you take nothing away from this presentation tonight, I hope it is that you will visit the project website. The project website is feedbackonchurchave.com. So you can access it that way by typing that into your browser. There's also a QR code up on the screen, and same thing, if you open up your camera on your smartphone and you scan that QR code, it'll take you to the project website. On the project website, the coolest feature, we think, and also the one that's most useful to the project design team, is this interactive feedback tool. And what you'll see if you go to this tool, you have to scroll down on the website, and there's a little, I think it's a white button with blue text, and it says, give us your feedback, or something to that effect. You can click on that. A little thing pops up that gives you instructions on how to do it. Thanks, Andy, for putting the link into the chat. I appreciate that. And you can drop comments. You can see the draft design. You can drop your ideas, your comments. You can also like comments that other people have left, or you can respond to their comments. So it's a pretty nifty tool. We definitely are paying close attention to this and trying to funnel people to this tool because it's really convenient, place for us to see the comments, for you to see the comments, and see others' comments. So I highly encourage you to check out this feedback tool if you haven't already. Okay, just quickly on the schedule. Right now we're in a stage where we're trying to coordinate with some of the utility companies, trying to figure out what's underneath the street. We're gathering some detailed survey for the redesign of the curb ramps that are not compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act. We are updating the 60% design, and a lot has changed on the corridor, and so we've been meeting with various stakeholders that are own property along Church Avenue. So we've been meeting with people like the Tucson Convention Center, Pima County, Downtown Partnership, and other folks that have a vested interest in what happens on the street. We're doing things like this meeting, so having public meetings. We did do one in-person meeting at Ciclovia where we had success interacting with a lot of folks who ride bikes and ride bikes downtown, and got some good feedback that way. We're hoping to finish up this phase of the work at the end of this month or early June. So if you have comments, now's the time within the next couple of weeks. We'd love to get those either in the public comment map, or you can feel free to email me or call me or Andy. So once we get all of that feedback from the stakeholders and the public, we'll be ready to get working on the 90% plans. And we hope to have those by summer, have final plans by the winter, and then begin construction in summer of 2023. All right, that is the end of my presentation. I'm curious to see if folks have questions, concerns. I know sometimes it's hard virtual, but we do love the feedback and the questions. So don't be shy. I will say, if you called in, so if you're not on a smartphone or on a computer, you may have to hit *6 on your phone. So for anybody who called in, just keep that in mind. You may have to hit *6. But I'll open it up to questions now. The only other thing I'll say quickly is we can open up the interactive comment tool, and we can pan and zoom to any specific location that folks want to look at. And that's one way that we can approach this too. So just let me know if you want me to open that up. And feel free to turn on your camera too if you have one. That always makes it a little bit nicer to see people's faces. I see at least one person has their camera on.
Yeah, I see
Hello.
some hands up. Thanks everyone for being so respectful and using your virtual hands. I can help try and moderate for Colin if and I saw BJ your hand first, so why don't we start there, and then Kevin.
Oh, thank you. This is my 40th year in the barrio. I live in Barrio Viejo, and I didn't know about this whole project until this morning. And so I came home and I went online, and I have to say that your interactive feedback tool, it's great. It was very easy to use. And I've forwarded the link to about 22 neighbors this morning, but I just wonder, how did it get to this point? And somebody like me didn't know this existed. So I'm questioning, what has the city done to notify neighbors about this project?
I can take that one, BJ, and I'll just say that you're first hearing about it because we are just initiating the outreach on the project right now. So we're in the early phase of this effort. This project, Church Ave, was included in Proposition 101 as one of the major streets that would be resurfaced under that package. So that was shared when approved by voters, back in 2018. Not remembering exactly right now. So, several kind of major streets were included for resurfacing in that package. This and a group of others, it's their time now. So we're picking them off now. It's like Colin mentioned, we're about a year out from construction, or a little more than a year out from construction. So we're just now starting to seek that feedback. We're showing the plans that we've got now to solicit that. In terms of notifications for tonight's meeting, we did send mailers to everyone who lives downtown and in surrounding neighborhoods up to 18th Street. So I don't know exactly where you are in Barrio Viejo, but
I'm in there, but I didn't get it.
Okay. Well, I'm really sorry to hear that. Sometimes they can often get mixed up with junk mail, or get overlooked that way. We also published this on our social media pages, the Tucson Department of Transportation media pages, and in the Newsnet. And so we've done the best we can to try and get the word out. But if there are better means for us to do that you think would reach you better, please let us know, and we can try and do that again in the future. And I would just also want to emphasize, it's far from too late. We've got a whole year. We do have additional outreach scheduled after this meeting as well. So fear not if you want to make sure that you and your neighbors are kept in the loop.
Thank you.
So I was curious about there's only a couple hard medians around Ochoa and Jackson, and is there a traffic or pedestrian purpose for those? And if so, why aren't they more elsewhere also?
Yeah, good question, Kevin. So what you're looking at on the interactive comment tool is what we're calling the ultimate version of the design. And so um, there's kind of a couple phases of work that are associated with this project. And so the interim project is what we can accomplish with the repaving and the striping. And then the ultimate, which is what's proposed on the interactive comment tool, is what we hope to be able to do in the future, or at least a starting point for what it could look like in the future when we have some additional funding. So that median that you're seeing, that's part of the ultimate design. So that wouldn't be something that you'd see as part of the interim in the next couple of years. But we're hopeful that if there's additional funding that we can bring to bear, that we can do more of that, more raised medians. And yeah, that it is a good question about the pedestrian benefit. There's a lot of comments on the interactive map about wanting to see more raised crossings, wanting to see more medians, wanting to see some landscaping. We agree wholeheartedly. All that stuff is stuff that we want to. The challenge is just the funding that's available today. So, this, I mentioned in the beginning that this was an opportunity that the city of Tucson saw as part of the resurfacing program that we have. So we're kind of limited to, what we can do with asphalt and paint at the moment. But I really encourage you to either like other comments that have more raised medians, that have pedestrian refuges, or have landscaping, or whatever it is that you'd like to see, or add new comments to let us know what you want, because that is something that we'd like to see in the future as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Anybody else? Questions? I didn't see anything in the chat.
This is Bobby Joe again. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
So this is what I would say about funding, having lived in the neighborhood for 40 years. The city of Tucson caused the problem. And this is nothing about you guys. I know you had nothing to do with this. But the city of Tucson created the problem with the construction of the convention center and throwing all this traffic right next to a residential neighborhood. For the city now to say, we don't have any money to do anything except repaving and paint, I just reject that. And I dare say that my neighbors reject that too. The city needs to finally, the convention center was built in what, 1977? All these years later, do right by the neighborhood, not we don't have the money to fix this. That's just ridiculous. And again, nothing against you. I know you guys are trying to do the right thing, and you already said that you agree on things like narrowing, but this is such a stupid conversation to have all these years later. I can't even get my brain around it.
Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for acknowledging that, yeah, some of the past decisions that have been made are, we can question those for sure. Well-intentioned at the time, perhaps, but yeah, certainly understand your frustration and understand that thought. I will say on a positive note, Proposition 411 did pass last night. So that's a good thing. And we certainly recognize that money's an issue for getting the outcomes that we want, and so we are hopeful that funding sources like that, we may be able to find some support there. I can't promise that right now, because there's a lot of folks who want to use that money for a lot of different reasons. That we have this safety category that's flexible. And so I do think we'll be looking more closely at that funding source and others. This isn't the end. It's just a starting point.
And I'll just piggyback on Colin. That's all. I agree with everything you just said, Colin. And thank you, Bobby Joe, for acknowledging that these decisions were preceding our time or doing the best we can moving forward. So I do appreciate that acknowledgement. I also totally get the frustration. So understood. And I would just say, please share whatever it is that you're referencing now as wanting or that should have been done in years ago. Let us know that now, because while Colin's not wrong, the Prop 101 funding source is very, that it is limited in what it can be used for. We want to capture all those things we would want to do on the street, whether it's adding lighting or landscaping and trees or expanded pedestrian, whatever it is that's in your mind that needs to be done on the street. This is the time we want to capture that. So whether or not we're able to do it at the time the street gets resurfaced, we're documenting that, and we're developing a concept for the corridor that then we can apply for grants for, or we can look at funding with Prop 411 or whatever other fund sources are available to the city. This process we're hoping to use to reflect that and say, hey, we went out to the public. We heard that there's support for the restriping plan for sure, but there's a lot of other needs on the corridor we've heard from. Let's make a plan to fund those. So that's part of, I think, our thinking in structuring the outreach in this way, and going ahead and showing some of those ultimate treatments on the interactive map.
Thank you.
Yeah. Great. And I see Diana Motto from the Ward 6 office. Thank you for posting there in the chat to VJ and to anyone else. She's also a really great resource to connect with and try and share information with the neighbors and be a great liaison between what's happening in the department and the ward office, and helping us communicate with neighborhoods. Thanks, Diana.
Yes, she's great. Steve's office is great. I guess as long as I can ask, one other question I have is, so I live in the barrio, which is just south of the area, right? South of Cushing. I'm assuming the city has a lot of traffic studies about the new garage that's just been built on Church Avenue, of where people are coming and going. And this is just my guess, right? I don't know this. So I'm hoping the city does. That I don't think many people coming into that garage are coming or going from the south. It just makes sense that most of Tucson is like there, right? It's to the east and it's to the north. The vast majority of people living in Tucson are to the east and north of the convention center. So if people are coming from the north, in other words, they're turning from Broadway onto Church, or they're turning from Congress onto Church to get to that new parking garage that's right there on the east side of the TCC. I don't think the majority of people are going to go south. That's my guess. People coming from the south is probably the minority. So I think, considering that the south end, the Cushing Street end, is a much more residential pedestrian part, I think should be taken into consideration for whatever is done. I don't think that we have the traffic that Broadway and Church does, approaching Church going south. I understand that's really people going to the TCC, a lot more business, but on the south end, I think we're mostly residential, and I think that should be taken into consideration.
And yeah, Bobby Joe, is the concern there that the traffic coming from the convention center is going through your neighborhood? Is that kind of what you're getting at?
No, I don't actually think they are. So I'm really happy with what the city just did a few weeks ago, putting the four-way stop there at, I call it Church Convent and Cushing. Although I still see people just, racing through because they're not used to a sign being there from so many years. And it's such a big, wide intersection. The sight lines are still really off there to see, especially if you're coming east to west on Cushing. If you're on Cushing going west, the sight line to that stop sign is really hard to see. It still just seems like an invitation to an accident. But to me, that's where it really I don't think there's that much convention center traffic there. I don't really observe that. But I think that's where it should really be viewed as a residential part of this zone, that particular intersection. Cushing, Church, Convent is more residential. I'm happy to say I don't see that many convention center people anymore. I used to see a lot more, but the city's put out signs now about don't park in residential areas. And thank you, Diana and Steve K's office for getting those out. I see a lot fewer convention center parkers in my neighborhood now, but I still see people racing through there. And I just think anything to moderate on Cushing traffic would be helpful in a residential zone.
Gotcha. Yeah, well, I will mention Cushing Street is part of the Proposition 101 Package 10, which is the same package as Church. We're not anticipating a major redesign of Cushing like we are with Church. Although I will say that we have had some conversations internally about the opportunity to add bike lanes to Cushing. So right now the travel lanes are very wide. The left turn lane is fairly wide. And so it's possible that when we repave and restripe it, we may be able to keep all the existing lanes that are there today and add a bike lane. And adding a bike lane, that has a visual narrowing effect on the travel lane and generally causes people to drive a little bit slower. I think you're right that the four-way stop should help with that as well. Certainly it helps with the site visibility challenges there. And specifically at that intersection, we have, if you look at the interactive map, there's a bunch of comments about that intersection, most of them focusing on wanting to make the crosswalk or just the pedestrian crossing in general work better across Cushing. And so that's something we're looking at. I would say for the interim treatment, it's unlikely that we'll be able to install those large curb extensions, which would be very nice. But maybe we can do them in a, with paint and posts, the flexible delineators. So we'll be looking at all of those opportunities to help make that crossing easier and help cars slow down at that location.
So I see in the chat conversation about Cushing being a major route for TFD, and that's why we aren't proposing to remove any travel lanes. But there's all sorts of parking along there, and that does not need to be there. That is only serving people going to the convention center, people who work in the neighborhood at mostly the police department, and they do not need those lanes. They have plenty of places to park. They have their own parking garage at the police department. Again, this is just a bogus. I'm sorry to get upset here, but this is just bogus. I'm tired after 40 years of this being thrown on the neighborhood of things the city created. Stop doing this to the neighborhood. Get rid of those parking lanes on Cushing, and you've got no problem for TFD. You've got vastly wider lanes than you need. It's because the city put in parking for its own employees that there's a problem. No other reason.
Andy, did you want to respond to that concern? I know you've had some preliminary conversations about that parking.
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, I think you're talking about parking probably all along Cushing. I know there's some
right next to the police department, both sides. That pull-in parking, that's for their employees. They have a garage. Park in your garage, not in my neighborhood. And don't give me this bogus TFD stuff. It's bogus. And you guys know it. Come on. I know you didn't create this, but don't defend it.
So yeah, I want to make sure that my chat comment, I think it's been misunderstood, BJ, because let me just clarify then. So Diana was asking, is Cushing a major route for TFD because there's a fire station right there at the end of Cushing? Yes, so it is an emergency response route. What I was clarifying is we're not intending to remove any travel lanes. So we would maintain what Colin just described as maintaining the center left turn lane with one lane of travel in each direction, but narrowing those lanes to add bike lanes, which there's, we think, width to do. Keeping everything else constant, I'll say between Convent and the the freeway, so to the west.
Yep.
To the east, let's talk about the parking you're talking about. So that angled parking that's on the north side of Cushing, that you're right, is reserved for TPD staff parking during the day. We've broached that conversation with our parking department, with Donovan Durbin, and we are intending to talk with TPD about it. We haven't done that yet, so I'm hesitant to make any promises at this point. We're working to get a meeting together with them to look at that, because
I would
like
like
Colin
the
said,
neighbors to
gonna
be
be-
invited to that meeting. That's all I'm saying. The idea that TPD and Donovan, he's a great guy, that they're going to talk among themselves, why not actually invite in the neighborhood to that meeting?
Yeah, no, I think there's absolutely a place to hear neighborhood feedback about parking on Cushing. I mean, there's also a place for internal coordination. So I think both meetings can happen. But
This
what
is
I was
not
getting at,
internal. This is employees of TPD parking their personal vehicles. I'm not talking about police cruisers. Come on.
yeah, so the point I was getting at, BJ, was that we are in discussion about removing that parking, or at least shifting it to parallel parking, which would remove some of the spaces and allow wider space for better bike lanes. And we are planning to talk to TPD about opening it up so that it could be accessible to more than just city staff, so that it could be publicly accessible parking. I hear you saying that you don't think parking is needed at all. I hear that.
No,
And I will take note of that here. So I just wanted to let you know of the conversations that we've had so far for full disclosure and transparency, which is what I hear you asking for.
not just transparency. Invite the neighbors to that meeting with TPD. That's all I'm asking for. I don't think that's internal. These are not police cruisers or emergency vehicles parking on Cushing. It's their personal vehicles. They don't have any more right to that street than you do, Andy, or I do. So why shouldn't we all be in that conversation? That's not internal. There's nothing internal about that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that's a conversation that should be had. That's why we've been pressing it, and certainly open to including the public in that conversation.
I see Diana has her hand up.
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to add something?
The
Yeah, go
only
ahead,
reason
Anna.
I had asked that question about fire using that as a main route is because of in my head, I'm thinking, traffic mitigation, how to slow down traffic. And I've tried to do that in other areas, but fire does have precedence in giving that permission because, for example, I can say I want to add, speed humps or like a traffic circle, but that they need to get to somebody. And if I prohibit that, then it's not going to happen. So that's why I was asking that question. As far as the parking that you're talking about, and definitely we will include you in a conversation so that we can know you and your neighbors, thoughts on, like, what are you dealing with that you would like that removed? We actually worked with Caitlin, one of your neighbors, to do that 4-way stop. So, I mean, we do need to hear feedback from you. I don't know who's on this, but I just, there's really kind of no way to get a hold of you all because I know it's not very easy to get a hold of everybody through your neighborhood association. But if I can get a hold of you and the neighbors that are affected by that parking, then we can definitely bring you into that conversation. Is what I guess what I'm trying to say.
Thanks, Dana. Great. I see BJ responding. They'll get in touch tomorrow. That's great. And BJ, it might be worth just including Colin or myself in that sense to keep us all in the loop, since we're the ones who've been talking to Donovan so far. Let's just bring everybody together. I like where that's headed. And I see the comment from Familia Leal about Bobby sharing it with all of you. So thanks, Bobby, for doing that. And thanks for sharing that comment.
Any other questions, concerns, things you wish was, a part of the plan that's not? Anything we can pull up and look at together? Just gonna make that offer again in case folks want to take a look at the design plans. Oh, thanks for that compliment on the site. All right. Well, I think we'll stay on and see if there's any other latecomers, or if anything comes to you, let us know.
And I'll let folks know we're going to do a version of this in Spanish starting at 7. So we're going to stay on until then and let folks join who may be wanting to hear the presentation in Spanish at that time. So you're welcome to stay on if you like. And if you want to hop off, feel free. Again, you can put the comments in the map or email us directly as things come up.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Colin, what do you think? Should we stop the recording and start it again at 7 for when we're posting it later to not have a long gap?
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
Okay,
Let's
I'm going
do
to
that.
stop now. Yeah.